if we're really only going to now eat at restaurants where the activities of the restaurants don't matter, right? Chick-fil-A will serve anybody, gay, straight, doesn't matter. Everybody is happy to eat a chicken sandwich. Chick-fil-A will serve. The real question is, if you are going to start boycotting businesses based on the personal views of the owners of the business, well, then we're going to end up with basically a two-tiered political system in every aspect of American life. And the country can't last that way. I mean, if I literally have to check out the political donation record of the restaurant's owner where I go to patronize the burger, I don't know how we're going to last as a country this way.
Yeah, you have to.
All right. That was Ben Shapiro. I'm another Ben Burgess, and I am joined by the crew, by producer, YouTube manager Kelly Carey, by producer Cale Brooks, by graphic designer J. Andrew World in a little bit while. Going to be joined by the founding editor of Current Affairs, Nathan Robinson, and then a little bit later by our good friend, extended crew member Djene Bajalan, to devote this episode to an extended exploration of Mr. Ben Shapiro, because a little while ago we did a episode called "Sam Harris is Wrong About Everything," a little poetic license, but it's almost true. And we also, before that, we did a episode called "Jordan Peterson Wants You to Clean 12 More Rooms." It's like, okay, Harris, Peterson, Shapiro was feeling a little left out, so we thought we'd do Shapiro. That just now that we watched was an explanation from. Actually, do we know when that clip is from? Do we have that?
It was from 2019, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so that's Shapiro in 2019. So I'm going to take a big sip of coffee, and what is Shapiro saying in 2021 of this subject of whether you should allow politics to decide which products you buy? Ooh. So this, for people listening to this later in podcast form who aren't seeing what's on screen, Ben & Jerry's tweet: Ben & Jerry's will end sales of our ice cream in the occupied Palestinian territory. And Ben quote tweets this and says, "Oh, well, guess I won't be eating any more of your ice cream," which, it's a small thing, but it's just kind of funny that the entire thing he just said about Chick-fil-A would seem to apply here. And whatever. I'm not even the biggest fan of consumer boycotts as a tool for social change. I think that we should focus on the areas where the working class has the most power, which is either in the ballot box where there are numbers, or in the workplace. Wrote an article about that for Jacobin a little while ago, called "Voting with Your Dollars is an Anti-Democratic Illusion." But forget that for a second. Just like, the inconsistency is funny, and frankly, it's also a little bit funny just because it's ice cream.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when Ben & Jerry's came out with Gaza caramel strip, but it probably tastes great. This is the whole I'm going to be a really good, moral consumer, and I'm only going to buy those things that align with my politics. We don't make the rules. If the left did this, we would have nothing. We would not be able to survive in a market-based society. It's just, this is the right throwing a tantrum. There's nothing. The whole game is stacked in their favor to throw boycott after boycott, and the left should see this as an obvious and basically unpolitical or anti-politics, as something that is not inherently political, but just, culture war for the sake of culture war, because it just keeps us away from dealing with actual issues of power, of capital, of capitalism.
Look, I mean, obviously, if the left was gonna boycott everything that reflected values that we don't like, we'd all starve to death, and we wouldn't be able to live anywhere, and we wouldn't be able to drive, and etc. But also it is just a little bit funny, because when it's I was talking to Kelly about this earlier today, and it seems like when it's something that Shapiro doesn't care about, right, which would be Chick-fil-A donating to groups that were trying to to dissolve people's marriages. I mean, that's what that was about. Then it's like, no, come on, what are you talking about? You're going to not eat this good chicken sandwich because of politics? Yeah, whatever. But when it's something that he does care about, which is to say some sort of like ethno-nationalist drive for a greater Israel, then this will not stand, sir. He will be taking his business to Haagen-Dazs.
I'm sorry. I just can't stop thinking about the moment earlier in this segment when you introduced people to Ben Shapiro, and I just have been imagining this world where I didn't know who Ben Shapiro was this whole time. And I'm like, oh, like, here's this guy. And then I just like get to like, and I'm like, bad take. This guy might have a bad take on one thing. And I'm just like living in bliss, you guys. Like, my world is so much better and I have such a better life and I'm just leading it. But the reality is he has gajillions of bad takes and they're all terribly bad. And, Kale's right. Like, most of them really do, like, if taken to the extreme, you cannot, like, his takes, if you apply them to the macro, then you can't, then you can't live in a society. That's Ben Burgess. Like, he does, or Ben, I did that to you earlier when we were talking. I'm sorry, wrong Ben.
Bad day to be a Ben.
It is a bad day to be a Ben. Sorry to all the Bens out there and every Ben listening. But that's Ben Shapiro. Like, I don't think that he just has bad takes. I think that he also doesn't understand the world to the degree that you would think that he might when he talks about politics. Because when he talks about politics, like, especially, he's very pro-Israel, and when he talks about that stuff, he's very informed on some level, right? So when you listen to it, you're like, okay, I'm listening to someone who's very informed, but it's so toxic in the sense that I don't think that this is somebody who has very much experience in being a person in the real world and dealing with other adults in adult situations beyond I don't know what. Like, I know he has a wife, and presumably he has like some persons whom he interacts with. I don't know if I would say he has friends, because I've seen some stuff. I've seen him talk about college, and like, that didn't seem to be like a friendly environment that he went through.
Do we have that one?
Oh yeah, we got that one. Let's. Do you want to? Well, hold that thought, Kelly. We gotta pull up the college years.
It's like 20 seconds, but we have a vivid illustration.
Yeah. He just doesn't.
I want to show you the 20 seconds of college.
All right, let's do that.
Oh, okay.
I'm the kind of jerk who'd go to a party at Harvard Law, and we'd go to a party, and I would bring a book with me, because if people were boring, I was not going to waste the 2 hours just sitting there.
It's a good time to read right now.
Yeah, exactly. I got in a lot of good reading at these parties. So.
Wow.
Sorry, so I've seen that. Well, why did you go to the party, man? Why didn't you just go home? Like, one would think that even someone that's socially inept would realize that meeting people would be good for you, just networking would be good for you later in some ways.
Well, Daddy was going to do that for him.
I don't get it. Like, I think that he just doesn't understand a lot about being a person, and that when he sits there with a microphone for his show, it doesn't come across as bad as it is. That's my thinking on him, because he sounds like he knows. He sounds like he has a perspective that is rooted in, in my opinion, terrible takes on life situations and, politics and points of view. But I also think that they're rooted in just not understanding how social things work and how, like, you know, one-on-one situations work and how group situations work. I don't think it's very weird.
Could I just one quick thought, because Kelly's probably right. I mean, it's hard to it's psychologize
to know, really,
what's in his head, but I'm willing to believe that, like, Shapiro is a true believer in what he's saying, and like that's why he's able to be so good at just like staying on message all the time, because he genuinely believes this. But the thing is that the people who support him, not the followers, not the fans, but like the economic entities, the conservative overlords that help carry his career forward when he's not willing to connect with his fellow students. Those people understand that Shapiro's role in society is to basically hide or pretend like capitalism and the economic system that we live in doesn't exist, that there is no economy, there is no society, it's just a bunch of individuals, and some people make better choices than others, and if you make bad decisions, well, that's on you, and you should have made better decisions. Class is completely erased, or when they use the word class, it becomes like a cultural term. It means the kinds of products you like to buy, or, if you're like a classy person or something. But for the most part, like capitalism, the actual social system with actual real, abstract but real dynamics that govern our lives is washed away in all of Shapiro's world. And that's, whether or not he knows he's doing that, that's his function for the right. It's to help obscure what's actually driving people's lives.
Well, I think that it's hard, if for what you're talking about, Kale, like there's like that, what you just defined as the right. And then there's like the right. There's all these different versions of the right. But what you just, I think everything that you said is true. Everything that you just said is true, but there's a certain segment of the right that uses him for that,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's not going to be like all of the segments of the right that will use him for that.
I mean, to be fair, though, if he went to college at the same time as Pete Buttigieg and the Facebook guy, I'd be sitting in the corner too, reading a book, not wanting to socialize with those creeps either. So, I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So when we were talking about this earlier today, Kale said, "Well, I want to warn you, Ben. I'm not a Ben Shapiro scholar, so I don't know how much I could, contribute here." And then my first reaction was to laugh at the combination of words Ben Shapiro scholar. Then my second reaction was to feel a little bit of shame that I sort of am, that like I actually have spent a lot of time thinking and writing about this dude, and that's obviously something that's gone horribly wrong in my life for that to be the case.
Wow.
But but misery loves company, and I want to make out all of you Ben Shapiro scholars in the next 5 minutes. So this, you really want to dig deep into him. What should you look at? You should look at the materials that that he's prepared to instruct students at his university, and wouldn't you know it, there's a Ben Shapiro PragerU video.
Oh boy. Inject me, baby. Let's hear it.
Vanderbilt University, November 2015. 200 students rise up to protest the white privilege and microaggressions of the racist, bigoted Vanderbilt administration. The protesters don't offer any specific examples of discrimination, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that they feel victimized. The next day, a bag of dog poop shows up at the front door of the university's Black Cultural Center. All hell breaks loose. Full of righteous indignation, student activist groups rush to Facebook to denounce the racist act. The police investigate. They quickly find the person responsible, but nobody is arrested. You know why? Because it turns out that the bag of excrement wasn't a racist attack. It was left by a blind girl with a service dog. She couldn't find a trash can, so, wanting to do the responsible thing, she left the bag outside the door of a nearby building, knowing a janitor would pick it up and throw it away. The student group did apologize, but then they added another charge against the administration. The needs of students with disabilities on this campus are also marginalized. Seriously, this is not a joke. On the college campus today, feelings rule facts and victims are heroes. According to the left, all inequality in America is due to victimization. They start by claiming that all non-white people in America are victims of white privilege. Then come women. They're all victims of the patriarchy. Then come gays and lesbians and the transgendered. They're all victims of our heteronormative and homophobic society. But what if you haven't been victimized by anybody? That doesn't matter to the left. So long as you feel victimized, you're a victim. Even if you have never actually experienced discrimination, you've surely been targeted by microaggressions. Nasty little words and phrases that weren't meant to be insults, but just are. If somebody asks you, where are you from? That's considered a xenophobic microaggression. They're implying that you are a foreigner. If a man holds open a door for a woman, which, by the way, you're supposed to do, that's a sexist microaggression because he's treating her like she's a helpless female. Of course, he's also treating her like she's a woman. But how would he know? And heaven forbid anybody address you by your biologically accurate pronoun. What if she identifies as a man? In short, everyone's a victim, except of course.
I really like the phrase biologically accurate
anybody who dares to
pronoun.
disagree with the left.
Yeah, wait. Pause.
If you're
Pause
guilty of either of those crimes, you must be confronted.
Okay, it's like it's hard. I have a point.
I do want to. There's going to be a lot to say about this. I just wanted to interject for a second to say I love the phrase biologically accurate pronoun, like that. Like pronoun use is a feature of biology.
God, we gotta interject with some G.A. Cohen on Ben Shapiro's ass. Teach them the difference between material and social. Yeah.
So there's a lot to there is a lot to say about this, but I'm worried that we only have half the lesson here.
Okay, sorry. Let's keep going.
Confronted, even if doing so requires actual aggression, like say a riot. Here's a trick the left plays to justify their violence. First, they say it's okay to punch Nazis. Then they say that every conservative, in fact, everybody they disagree with, is a Nazi.
What?
But here's the biggest problem with the left's argument. They're based on feelings, not facts. Take white privilege.
Okay, stop.
The only real privilege
Can we
in
just
America.
Stop it for a second? All right, hold on. Was this when he how do you call it? Pinned his tweet? Did he do this after making this dumb?
That might be for people who aren't sure what she's talking about. Ben Shapiro's pinned tweet for years has been faxed over.
None of the things, and I can speak for myself only as you know. Well, no, I can speak for other people. I guess is what you don't need to. There don't need to be microaggressions involved in this stuff. I mean, if there is white privilege, you can chart it out by, do black people, are black people less likely to get as good a job as a white person? Are Asian Americans less likely to get as good? It turns out Asian Americans are less likely to rise above middle management than white people. I mean, these are tangible things. Like these, it's not microaggressions that we're worried about. I don't care about microaggressions. I want to make more than 76 cents on the dollar compared to Kale, because frankly, I deserve twice what Kale makes. I'm just kidding.
Look,
you're not
we
wrong.
have a policy at GTAA. I mean, I pay Kelly, 70 cents, the dollar, what Kale and Andy make. I mean, that's just, you don't like it, go work somewhere else.
These aren't my feelings. Like he's insisting on making it about feelings when it is in fact about facts. Like the complaints of the left are predominantly about facts. You want to do the college campus thing? Great. Do the college campus thing. But the other stuff is rooted in a lot more than that. And it doesn't.
For sure, right? Like, so he's doing the typical Ben Shapiro thing and the typical lots of these guys thing, which is that can you find examples of college students, some activists in colleges being crazy? Yeah, of course you can, right? I mean, that's
I will go out with every single dude that I know, and that would be a horrifying experience, I can tell you right now, and have them slam the door on my face, forget my name, and then make me pay if I could get, dudes to listen to me in the workplace and, pay equity for the rest of my life.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that would be feelings. That would be facts caring about my feelings, because that would be horrible feelings.
Well, and again, the whole point is that, like, Shapiro's like facts versus feelings means that there's no room for society in this. That there is no society. There's only feelings that are hurt, and you should, adjust your feelings to the raw reality of what you have to do, as an individual to get by. But it doesn't. There's no sense of, well, what if the society you're in inhibits your ability to do something, or what if it limits the choices you have as an individual to that you don't have good choices, or that you don't have the resources to be able to make a better choice. None of that is a part of this. It's just
so that's
you're telling me.
He has he did this, like, so after he does his find some crazy college kids to use as a prop to set the whole thing up, he says that the left says that inequality only comes from whatever he said, discrimination or oppression or some word like that, right? And they're the thing that's left out of this is, okay, Ben, so if that's wrong, right, where do these inequalities come from, right? I mean, those objective disparities that Kelly is talking about, the gender pay gap, or the disparities between white people and black people, and poverty and incarceration and education and healthcare, and pretty much everything else, what's his view of where they come from. And that's just kind of left hanging, right? Because he doesn't really want to get into that. And I do want to once we're done, I do want to go back to the facts and feelings. By the way, just Antonio, thank you so much for the super chat. He asked, "Are we going to cover the Neil interview, Neil deGrasse Tyson?" Yes, we are. When Nathan is here, but first, if it's not going to depress anybody too much, I do want to just finish up here.
American privilege. Everybody in America has it. More than citizens of any other country in the world, the privilege to make your own decisions and live the life you choose. According to the liberal Brookings Institution, if you make just these 3 decisions, you'll do fine. And with drive and ambition, you'll probably do better than fine. First, finish high school. Second, don't have babies before you're married. Third, hold down a job. If you do these 3 things, you'll be on your way to the privilege of middle-class life, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender. Also, there's no patriarchy. Women already make up the majority of college graduates. According to Time magazine, young single women without kids already earn more than their male counterparts. Oh, and gay and lesbian couples, they earn more than their straight counterparts too. These are facts, and facts don't care about your feelings. Neither will your employer if you get a job after you leave school. The moment you graduate, reality is going to hit you like a truck. People who give you a paycheck expect you to produce. They expect you to work hard. And all the claims of victimhood, all the whining, well, nobody cares. So stop worrying so much about your feelings and start worrying a little more about being a good person, doing your best, and not getting in your own way. If you don't, the only thing you'll be a victim of is yourself. I'm Ben Shapiro, editor of the Daily Wire for Prager University.
Thanks, Ben. That was great. I'm so glad we watched that.
I feel like a victim of Ben Shapiro now.
Yeah, fair enough. Just so real quick before it gets lost. Okay, so Daniel, thank you for the super chat. Says facts, feelings is inherently false dichotomy. Yes, I want to get into that exact point in just a minute, but first I can't let that last part go by without saying that what he's talking about there, like, this is something that a lot of conservatives love, the success sequence, which is the idea that we have this statistical information that shows that if you do these 3 or 4 things, that the list vary, you don't have any kids until later, and you have, you get married, and and you hold down a steady job, etc., then you'll be then you won't be living in poverty. And Matt Brunig has done good stuff on this, basically showing that if you dig into the statistics everything else is misleading. I mean, the only part of this that's actually relevant is the having a job, basically. I mean, that's the, like, everything else, because like you say, like once you're looking at the stats, you say, oh, if you have a job and also X, Y, and Z, right? Are you going to be above a certain economic threshold? Yeah, sure you are. Like, but like everything else is just kind of like throwing in statistical noise to try to justify the socially conservative stuff that they want.
Yeah, and it just like, it also means, I mean, like, it just, even like the most generous reading of what, you know, Shapiro is saying, of like, if you just have these three things, the fact that people don't execute those in the way that he's describing it just means that, you know, poor people are stupid, or, you know, it's this whole like, you know, you have the wrong behavior, the wrong attitude, that it's inherently something wrong with your, you know, the way you understand the world, like the information you have in your head, you know. And so if obviously, yeah, like people do have tons of mental health issues. You know, if only there was, you know, enough, you know, resources put into healthcare so that everyone could have a therapist. What if it was therapists for all? What if like the therapists were paid for by a single payer system where everyone was guaranteed that they have healthcare when they need it, so they don't that, you know, mental health issues don't become hindrances on their ability to be an individual in society. Like, you know, I just, before I kind of finish my little spiel, I just want to share the great Jeremy Corbyn meme that people are not prepared any longer to live in a society. So that's like, this is like just being on the left right now in the Bernie Corbyn era, and like in kind of now in the post Bernie Corbyn era, it's like so much of what our politics comes down to is just saying like, wow, wouldn't it be great if we like lived in a real society? Like, what if like we acknowledge the actual social systems and institutions that do in fact determine people's outcomes in life? That your ability to make it in life is not dependent on, you know, the birth lottery, and that we actually did things to adjust society so that people had better outcomes. Wouldn't that be something? But obviously that doesn't really fit into the Shapiro worldview because it's not supposed to.
I mean, it doesn't apply to him. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I did just want to say real briefly on the facts and feelings point. This is why the cover of my first book has the picture that Ryan Lake drew of David Hume shushing Ben Shapiro as he tries to say facts don't care about your feelings. The whole thing that he's trying to say when he says that, like to the extent that there's like a thought there and it's not just like a way of sneering, is, well, fuzzy-headed like liberals and progressives and leftists and socialists base their like moral and political conclusions on their feelings, but hard-headed, you know, conservatives like Ben Shapiro base them on facts, which is just totally confused because of the David Hume point about facts and values. That, in other words, like facts can be relevant when we're trying to figure out how to achieve the goals that we care about, but the facts by themselves can't tell us which goals to care about. That's unfortunately, that just is a matter, you know, that just is a matter of feelings, right? I mean, when you know, Ben Shapiro wants people to stop, you know, acting like whatever sort of, you know, thing is he sees as his opposition, you know, crazy blue-haired college kids or whatever, that's a feeling, you know. I mean, for that matter, like if you care about, you know, whatever it is that, you know, that he cares about, having, you know, lowering the minimum wage and, you know, and expelling all the Palestinians, greater Israel or whatever, right? Like those are goals that he cares about. Those are feelings, you know. That's not the idea that there is a possible politics that would just be about facts doesn't make sense. That, you know, that the facts are relevant when you're saying, oh, how do I achieve this goal that I care about? Well, here are things that have been tried and here's how they turned out. Then the facts come in. But actual political goals, I mean, just are feelings that, you know, that you have to care about some sort of goal in the first place.
Right. I mean, I take this point from the great Anwar Sheikh. He has, and he's not the only one who's ever made this point, obviously, and this is relevant to when we get to in a moment the Neil deGrasse Tyson interview. This like notion of just, well, there just is objective science, and Anwar's point was, well, no, how you decide to measure any given thing, any social fact, any material fact, like what you decide is relevant, the criteria that you base, your collecting of information it's a part of a worldview. You already are making certain judgments about the world when you say this information is relevant to look at right now versus this other thing. You could say, one person could say, look, this live stream is not very diverse at all. It's all white people. Or you could say, no, it's extremely diverse. Just look at the age range or look at the eye color or something. Depending on what you prioritize as relevant information as your criteria when you're going into something matters a great deal. And like, that's, Shapiro, and again, we'll get to this, but like, he's trying to obfuscate that he doesn't want to deal with the actual political differences that underlie it's just objective science.
Also, there are significant, and in the case, I think it's pretty significant outliers to his like recipe for success type of thing, because I did everything that in his recipe for success of how to be financially successful, but the problem is there are economic disruptors that come into play and we can't always predict them, right? So when I was in grad school, and oh God, I'm so old, but when I was in grad school, there was a major recession, and literally within the year, 50% of the jobs in publishing, whether it was digital or print in New York, had gone away. So I had just made a serious investment in something that no one could have foreseen being like totally non-viable. No, absolutely nobody could have predicted it. Well, I mean, some guy that I ended up waiting on, near the financial district, so that he could have predicted it, but he was totally crazy. But and there's some people that could have foreseen it, but I mean, things like that happen. And then, years later, like now, there are thousands of people who were very much invested in that industry that have now, it was a slow, calling of the herd, but like thousands of people had to, figure out what they were going to do with, how they were going to change their trajectory of their careers. And it really didn't work out for like many, 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 many people.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a slow, move out of the city, and and there are lots of industries that get upended like that.
Yeah, that's certainly my experience of,
academia.
Academia. I finished grad school just as the effects of that worldwide economic meltdown will really make themselves felt a couple of years later in the academic job market. So my my success recipe was to was to scrape by as an adjunct for a few years and bounce around a couple of temporary jobs, and then and then start a Marxist podcast. So that's what everybody should do. But but yeah, I think so we do need to show the preview of the conversation with Luke and get Nathan on. But okay. I did just want to hit two things because I do not want these to get lost. So there's another respect beyond the one I mentioned, which is just to try to put that more succinctly, that his success recipe really boils down to, if you have a job, you're not going to be as poor as people without jobs, which, is true. But also kind of ignores the question of why it is that, generally
that's not actually true.
Well, it's not going to be true in every case, but by and large, being employed, you're going to be less poor than if you're unemployed.
Yeah, it's the Joan Robinson quote that the only thing worse than being exploited is to not be exploited.
But like, I know Nathan also had another respect in which it's misleading. We'll save that until he gets on. But I just want to point out that like he is doing the same thing he's doing there, just ignoring the question of, okay, so what about unemployment though? Like, is there a legitimate complaint about that? And, he's doing the same thing when he's talking about the pay gap, because he says, well, married, single women, whatever, like where, women without children, whatever the stat that, that he drops there is. But then he completely ignores the question of, okay, like whatever percentage it is of the pay gap that comes from people taking time off to raise very young children. Like, should we just accept that as the only way that things could possibly be? Like, like rather than having, meaningful paid parental leave or state daycare or, any of that stuff. All right. Andy.
What a glorious world. That would be so nice. It would be so nice. Or the men could stay at home.
Sure, meaningful paid parental, paternal leave, same deal.
Or get people have choices. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Andy, you've been a little quiet. I think maybe you've just been absorbing all the wisdom that was imparted through that PragerU video.
I really want to get that magna cum laude degree from PragerU. That's like my new goal here. With a minor in Ben Shapiro, of course. So I've been scribbling down notes, making sure I'm good. No, I don't really have a whole lot much to add because I tend to just ignore Ben Shapiro most of the time, and just see that he's trending, roll my eyes, and go on with my life.
All right, well, we will turn you into a Ben Shapiro scholar before too much longer.
I will say this though,
that face that Kelly just made, you're missing it if you're listening to this podcast. But
if you don't have to, then don't.
No, one real quick thing. I think the problem with Ben Shapiro's analysis is that he was a smart child, and everybody saw that he was a smart child, and everybody told him he was a smart child, and his analysis stopped at age whatever his curiosity kind of stopped at, and now he's projecting for the same thing that got patted on the head when he was like 10. And I think that's where the problem of Ben Shapiro lies. But
did that not happen to? Okay, let me just take a poll. Hey, Kale, did everyone tell you were a smart child? And did they pat you on the head and they're like, you're a smart child? And hey, Ben, like, did everyone do that to you? Because they did it to me.
I mean, do you watch the Jacobin YouTube channel? That they still do it to me.
They did it to me, and
Kale, he's a smart child every week.
I was just a little thought I was a little genius, but I didn't just stop thinking and I just kept wrecking.
Maybe they told it to Ben too many times, but we really do need to get moving so we can get Nathan on in a minute.
Sorry, Nathan.
Thank you guys so much.
So much more interesting too than any of this.
Let's do this is from a conversation with Jacobin staff writer Luke Savage about James Carville. This is from last week, but because we were doing something different from last week's show, we didn't have the regular Monday preview. We do not have yet the I think the episode that's going to release for patrons on Thursday is probably going to be recorded in the next day or two. I think that might be the long delayed Harvey K confrontation. But in this case, I was asking Luke about James Carville's long record of singing the same song about how Democrats lose because of fringe activists who are too far left, and kind of the and just kind of the absurdity of Carville's claim to be this hyper competent technocrat who knows better, how to win elections and do politics than any of these fringe left activists possibly could. So we're going to do 2 minutes of the preview of the Luke Savage interview which dropped for patrons last Thursday. If you want to watch the whole interview, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgess, become a GTAA patron, and you get these weekly Thursday patron exclusive episodes. You get the post game right after the main show on Monday night, and you get a lot else. But let's watch Luke do a little James Carville, so we can go back to Ben Shapiro.
But the War Room, however much you want to fault the filmmakers, really did build, brands for guys like George Stephanopoulos and James Carville, who are kind of the stars of the film. And, a lot of the film's appeal, I think, when it came out was that, it was kind of billing itself as like, look, we're peeling back the curtains to show you what, the smart backroom boys of politics, what they do. And, so, on paper anyway, the idea is that like, look, we're demystifying politics, we're breaking the fourth wall. But I think the sort of wizardry that you're supposedly seeing from these strategists, is really about kind of elevating them as the separate class that has a kind of a secret knowledge that is really impenetrable to the rest of us. You've seen that, I think, increasingly since the early 90s, with strategists, with consultants, and with pollsters as well to some extent. And of course, consultants are often just kind of a hybrid of those two things. And it's pretty funny because if you watch the film, what you'll see is that Carville and Stephanopoulos do things like, after a debate, you see them running into like the press, rooms where the press are gathered, and they just deliver talking points. They're like, oh, wow, lots of knockout blows for Clinton tonight. Big night for Clinton. I thought Bush looked weak, like that kind of thing. And, this is not like Sun Tzu's The Art of War, like this is, it's really the cheapening of politics and its kind of final collapse into marketing bullshit and spectacle. And I think inadvertently, perhaps a film like The War Room, which is a piece of filmmaking, is great, kind of invites us to celebrate all that and to sort of be wowed by it. And so, here we are, 30 years later, basically, and we're still having to listen to James Carville's, half-formed takes about the American political landscape, like he's got, like he has access to this, this special knowledge.
All right. So again, for the full conversation with Luke Savage, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgess. $5 a month. You get all those patron episodes. You get post games on Monday nights. You get access to the Discord server, the monthly Discord movie nights, the Discord office hours, which we are going to start going back to doing. And most importantly, you support the work that we do here in educating you and informing you, which we are now going to continue with our conversation with noted Ben Shapiro scholar Nathan Robinson.
Oh, so God. That is what I am now, though. I know. It's true. It's true. I can't believe I've developed an expertise in this, man, but I have. So thank you for having me, Ben.
I think actually probably one of the first. Try to remember the chronology. I might be getting this mixed up in my head, but I think that one of the first articles that I ever read from you before I knew you was one that was about Shapiro that was memorably called The Cool Kids Philosopher.
Which the New York Times branded him.
Yes, there was a New York Times profile of Shapiro that referred to him as the Cool Kids Philosopher, which is, but which is the sort of thing that like this is this is my favorite sort of like Nathanish activity that you do, on behalf of everybody else, doing these like super deep dives into these guys to write these like 10,000 word takedowns of the absurdity of everything that they write, which you did a follow-up one just recently,
Indeed.
Everything it's entitled "Everything Ben Shapiro Says Is Still Worthless," and I want to get into the specific arguments that you mentioned here, but I do want to just set up a little bit that I think part of the reason that you did this, and is oftentimes when there are people on the left who will might consume shows like this, who say, man, you're doing a whole episode on Ben Shapiro. I mean, isn't that guy kind of yesterday's news? And you bring some disturbing empirical information into the beginning of this about why that's wrong.
Yeah, is this a Facebook post?
Yeah.
Yes, I have yes in there the statistics of the top 10. There's an account that posts the top 10 most popular Facebook posts on any given day from all accounts, and this was just for a random day, June 17th. Number 1, Ben Shapiro. Number 2, Ben Shapiro. Number 4, Ben Shapiro. Number 6, 7. Ben Shapiro. So I think it's like 6 of the top 10 Facebook posts in the United States are posts by Ben Shapiro. I have that. I mean, I have the same instinct as those people. Why do you care about that guy? Why are you dealing with that guy? Interestingly, one of the whole reasons, though, that I started Current Affairs was that I rejected that philosophy because I had an article that I submitted to a magazine about Thomas Sowell, the libertarian economist. And the editor replied to me and said, well, this is a very interesting article, but who cares about Thomas Sowell? Like, he's irrelevant. And Thomas Sowell is probably the best-selling economics writer in the country. Right. But he's widely read. And the same with Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is probably the most listened to, or one of the top most listened to political commentators in the country. So if we ignore him, and I would love to have ignored him after that first article, we are ignoring what other people are listening to and being persuaded by and watching.
Yeah, exactly. Gerard, Jareed, thanks you for the super chat. Says some people have to quit working at McDonald's because gas for the drive to work costs more than earnings. It's absolutely true. That reminds me, by the way, so you had pointed out in the private chat that beyond the problem that we pointed out, there's another really straightforward problem with the Shapiro success sequence argument from earlier.
Oh my God. This drives me up the wall, Shapiro, with this success sequence, right? Because he says, all I have to do is graduate high school, get married, have a job, and you won't be poor. And as you pointed out, well, technically, if you have a full-time job, you are not poor because a minimum wage full-time job pays more than the poverty line, right? So forget. Right. But
you might be poor, more accurate said. You're not going to be poor in the sense that's used for this. Yeah.
Yes, right. Your income. Now, whether your life, as you said, as the commenter just put it, right? It might be that all of the money you get, you have to spend trying to keep yourself alive. But there's a bigger point, which is that a full third of the population of poor people is children. Right. He is telling children.
Why haven't they graduated from high school and got married and gotten jobs?
If they graduated from high school and they had a job and they were married, they wouldn't be poor. And then another, if you look at this is from the Brookings Institute. I know he knows what the Brookings Institute is because he cites, because they developed the success sequence and he loves to cite it because they're liberals. Okay, 32% children, 12% old people who he wants to put to work and says should graduate high school. Another 11%, which gets us over the 50% mark, is disabled people who he wants to put to work. And then you see that down at the bottom left there, caregivers and students. So he wants to take people who are full-time caregivers for people who can't take care of themselves. They should go to work. And the students who are full-time students should go to work. So when you actually look at the population of poor people, it tends to be people who can't have full-time jobs. And Ben Shapiro's advice to them is, why don't you have a full-time job? And this is why Ben Shapiro is an idiot who doesn't understand anything about poverty in America. I'm sorry. This really, really drives me up the wall because he repeats it over and over as if, and you were talking about values infecting science, these are just facts. The fact is that if you get, and it sounds so reasonable. Oh, if you only graduated high school, he says, oh, these are decisions that you can make. If you make these decisions, then you won't be poor. And it sounds reasonable if you know nothing. But the moment you know something about the population of poor people in America, it begins to sound ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, my wife likes, ESPN much more than I do. I mean, I enjoy watching an occasional hockey game or whatnot, but she's much more into it. And when we first got together, there was this ESPN show that she watched, so I ended up watching a lot of it, called Numbers Never Lie. And the format of the show is that the co-host would have an argument about some sports question of the week, and then they would trot out some statistic at the end that would supposedly solve it because numbers never lie. And this drove me crazy in a way she probably found kind of annoying that I went on about, because of course numbers can mislead like crazy. You're picking one statistic to use to treat as if it solved the argument, but of course, as the success sequence example shows, right? It could very well be that there are 3 other numbers that, if you had chosen to mention them at the end of the segment, would have complicated the impression. It could be that in the way that Cale was talking about, that you have to have underlying priorities to decide which data to look at, in the first place.
I just love that implicitly Ben Shapiro's solution to child poverty is child labor and child marriage, because I can't think of anything else based on what he said, right? I mean, he when he's asked about poverty, when he talks about poverty, this is what he discusses as the solution, is labor and marriage. And and he has all this stuff where he goes, well, if you work in America, you'll be fine. And it's okay, are we applying that to everyone? I don't know if he has another solution. I think he just doesn't. I mean, he hasn't thought about it. We know he hasn't thought about it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And Daniel Slapkoff, thank you for that. Sung Ha Hong, not familiar with, but we'll check out. Strom McCallum says the poverty threshold is way too low, which is certainly true. It'd be much more meaning. I mean, again, literally, minimum wage times 40 hours gets you above poverty line in every state. So yes, no kidding. If you have a job plus 2 or 3 things that we arbitrarily package together to make a statistically misleading point, then sure, you're above the poverty line. Not very important and not very informative to focus on that, but. Because we are talking about facts and feelings, before we get into the other economic arguments that Shapiro makes that you talk about in your article, I do want to talk about one of his cultural arguments a little bit, and this is one of the ones that is a Shapiro classic fixation. You talked about it in your article. I think everybody talks about Shapiro talks about it because he's been banging this drum for as long as I think he's been doing what he's doing, but this is a very recent example. Cale, do we have the Neil deGrasse Tyson clip?
I guess the area where it does come up in a non-sports area.
Yeah, tell me, I don't know.
So it would be, you talk in your book about the education of children and teaching children about science. And right now, children are being taught about the quote-unquote gender spectrum, which is not scientifically based. That is a theory-based idea.
No, wait, hold on. People express themselves on a spectrum. So you learn that.
That's a social point, not a scientific point.
It's
meaning we express ourselves
hold on.
in different languages. Is that something you teach in science class, or is that something that you teach when you're teaching language?
So whether the fact that people want to express themselves on a spectrum, on a gender spectrum, whether that fact is something you want to put in a sociology class or in a science class, maybe that remains to be determined. But it is a real fact about real society.
Well, of course, nobody's denying that people identify how they want to identify.
So
the question is, what is the relationship of that to biology? Meaning that the argument is made that trans women are women, for example, And what that seems to mean is that trans women are identical to women. Now, if people want to say trans women are not biological women, obviously that is the case. But people don't seem to want to say that, although that is obviously scientifically true. Trans women are not biological women. Biological women are biological women.
But where are you going with this? What are you trying to accomplish by asking yourself, is it science or is it not science? It's people in society.
Oh boy.
I like that where you're going with this because I mean I think that's kind of the
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Well, Shapiro has been hung up on this for a long time, and this is one of his central issues, and he just basically repeats the same thing over and over, which is that trans women are not real women because they're not biological women, and so they're trying. You can't become something by saying that's what you are. And there's the incredible video on Ben Shapiro by Natalie Wynn, ContraPoints, where she explains at great length, and she tries to be real careful to explain it in a way that he can understand where he is going wrong, which is that the words we use are choices. And so when you say biological woman, we could use that term to refer to chromosomes if we wanted to. We could use that term we could use it to refer to identity, how people feel. I mean, we could. Biology, right? We choose the categories that we use. If we want the word woman to refer to anything, we can make that word refer to that thing. And as Neil deGrasse Tyson is trying to point out to him, the social categories of gender are quite real. And so the language has developed to accommodate how people actually express themselves, how they are in the real world. And Ben Shapiro wants to change language to be decoupled from how gender operates in the real world. And the reason this is an absurdity, right, is because you see that even he can't maintain it. Because I pointed out in the first article that I wrote about, he was talking about Laverne Cox. And he said, Laverne Cox, she. And then he caught himself and he went, I mean he, right? He misgendered Laverne Cox because he wants to insist that Laverne Cox is not a, quote, biological woman and so must therefore be referred to with male pronouns. But he knows full well that in terms of the social categories of gender, Laverne Cox is a woman. He can't even keep himself from thinking of Laverne Cox as a woman because everyone thinks of Laverne Cox as a woman. And so he's trying to force us to adopt a conception of language that isn't natural. And, Natalie tried to explain this. She's like, these are words. We pick the words. Nobody actually is arguing about the biology. He thinks people are arguing about biological facts, right? He thinks people are arguing about biological facts when they're actually arguing about the words we use, right?
No, they're arguing about the normative significance of the biological facts.
No but this is what trans people write in response to him. He never listens because he never wants to actually discuss this with anyone who would know something and could put him in his place, right? He didn't respond to Natalie. He hasn't responded to any of the leftists who've offered to debate him. But what trans people point out is they think about their biology constantly. They know what their chromosomes are. They know why they take hormones, right? They know that they know that their hormones are naturally different, which is why they have to take hormones. Right? So they're not delusional. They understand fully well exactly but they have a much better understanding of their biology than he does. Right? But, he really does not get. And I constantly cite Julia Serrano, who's a PhD biologist, and is a trans woman. And she has all these writings about where she's like, I get the biology. I studied I studied biology professionally. But what you do not get is words. And that's what Natalie says. She says, it's not I who misunderstand biology, Ben Shapiro. It's you who misunderstand language. And it's a point that he still hasn't grasped.
Yeah, because it's like what you said earlier, right? It's a choice, right, about how to use language that, of course, like what he's insisting on, and I love that from the earlier video, his phrase used the phrase biologically correct pronouns, which I can't, that's an amazing combination of words because it suggests the actual pronouns are part of biology somehow. But the choice of which words you make, you mean like it's a sure, one internally consistent way of slicing up the world with language is to insist on using terms like gender, man, woman, he, she, etc. to refer to chromosomal sex. That's one way that's internally consistent. It's not the only internally consistent way of using it. You can use it to refer to gender identity, gender presentation, some combination of these things in ways that are all also completely internally consistent. And the question is, well, at least in most contexts, right? What's the morally better like linguistic framework to use? And this is something that I think we have no trouble understanding in other contexts, right? I mean, like, so that I really like Sophie Grace Chappelle, say a trans philosophy professor, has a nice analogy that I think has become quite popular about parents, right? Like sure, yeah, we can use words like parent, mother, father, etc. One internally consistent way of using words like that is to exclusively refer to a biological relationship, and certainly that's how we sometimes use it. When the test came back and you're not the father, right? Everybody understands what father means there, but it's not the only way that we use it, and we also use it to describe a social fact, that's different from biology. In most cases, the two coincide. In some cases, they come apart, and we have to choose what linguistic framework to use. And it is and to push Chappelle's metaphor here. I mean, we could imagine some hypothetical world where there was some lunatic fringe of bigots for whom it was very, very important that adoptive parents not be given any of the normal legal rights or protections of biological parents. And, they could use, no, I'm not going to allow a person to end a PTA meeting. Parent is a word that has a definition. Damn it, it's biology.
Yeah. Well, the way to understand Ben Shapiro is that he is the equivalent of a person who meets someone whose parents adopted them and says, those aren't your parents. And the person goes, yes, these are my parents. They adopted me when I was, and he goes, no. Parents is biology. They're not your biological parents, so they're not your parents. And the answer in that scenario is he's wrong, right? He's wrong because that's not how the term is used, right? He is pretending that there is that language is sort of given to us by the world, as you said, that the concepts are embedded in the biology. But that's not true, right? We make the concept of parents, and if parenting is a social relationship, it is not correct to say those aren't your parents, because all you're saying is I am choosing not to accept those because I have a different personal definition of the word that is not the definition of the word that you choose.
Yeah, I mean, one could almost say that, like, just willfully misunderstanding the difference between biological and social facts, or the fact that language can refer to either, is a bit, smacks a bit of ignoring facts that you don't like because you have strong feelings. But I do want to bring on Djene Bajalan in just a minute, to join us. But first, I want to just do a lightning round of some of the other Shapiro arguments that you mentioned in this article. So there are a few of these. The first one was about minimum wage. Shapiro says that minimum wages are, quote, predicated on a very stupid notion, unquote, which is that employers are Scrooge McDuck. They have a money pool called profits. So this is, people who are as old as I am will remember DuckTales. Scrooge McDuck swam around in a swimming pool of gold coins. This is the metaphor that the other Ben is calling back to. So they have a money pool called profits, which can be shared with their workers if it was pried open through the use of law. That this is what people who support raising the minimum wage to $15, or honestly, I think it should be more than that, but whatever. To at this point, this is what they have in mind. So Nathan, is this not, in fact, the right way to understand what's going on here?
Well, yeah, he says it's a stupid notion, but it's actually just a legal description of how a corporation is structured as a legal institution, which is that a corporation, as we know, is a profit maximizing entity that does in fact direct a big pool of money over to its shareholders, its owners, and it is structured by the law. The law can change that structure, and if the law says that instead that pool of money before it goes to the owners has to be its labor costs, at least when you're, there's a minimum wage, and if you employ people, you have to pay them at least $15. The law can do that, and in fact, what we find is that when the law does that, the effects. Ben Shapiro leans very heavily on the old minimum wages cause unemployment argument, right? Which Thomas Sowell as well does, which a lot of libertarians really, really cling to because they need it to be true. Because if it's not true, then it suggests that all they have is like the inherent defense of property rights, right? So if they really need it to minimum wages to have bad effects, because if minimum wages have good effects, it's going to make it really hard to convince people to be libertarians. And so as a result, they've had to ignore the growing body of empirical literature that has persuaded the economics profession over the course of the last 30 years that in fact minimum wages are not a bad thing. And they have to all sort of pretend that economics hasn't advanced in 30 years, where it has. And we've actually found out that when you put more money in workers' pockets, they spend the money employing more workers, right? And as a matter of fact, nobody's found massive effects from increased minimum wages on employment. And so, Ben Shapiro is stuck trying to convince people of facts that are just totally out of step with the empirical literature.
Yeah, it's also worth noting there is a fact value thing going on here too, because let's say for the sake of argument that that there was that you have that there's a 2%, if you increased the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour or $20 an hour, that there would be a 2% or 3% increase in unemployment. Well, okay, first, that only ends the argument if you assume that increased employment is like worse than then all these people being able, who still have jobs being paid living wages is bad. There's also the whole wacky question, as you and I pointed out in an article that we wrote last summer for Time is Blurry, but I think it's last summer, about Glenn Beck's socialism book. That of course, if this is true, hey, socialists also want to have a federal jobs guarantee. So, I'd presumably, of course, people like Beck and Shapiro wouldn't support that. But at that point, they have to kind of admit that their concern is really with business owners and not with workers.
Yes.
All right, let's do the next one in the lightning round. Debunking unions. This is Shapiro. Is how Shapiro describes what he's doing, which is an interesting combination of words. How does Shapiro think he's debunked unions, and why hasn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he focuses on teachers' unions. He says he's debunking unions, but just one of the interesting things here was I first noticed this video because Ben Shapiro posted his debunking unions video on Facebook. And then if you look at the comments, interestingly, like even his followers are not really buying it because a lot of them are from union families. And they're like, well, I make a lot more than non-union people in my trade. And ultimately, he has to, in this case, avoid what is sort of the central fact about unions, which is that union labor is paid more, right? Which everyone knows, right? This is employers complain about having to pay union workers more. There is a union wage premium where if across everywhere, right, you're better off as a worker. You're almost certainly better off being in a union, this is even after dues, than not being in a union. It is in the interest of workers to unionize because it increases their bargaining power, they get more money. That pool of profits is pried open. And so Shapiro really, actually, I was kind of shocked at how little he does to debunk even teachers' unions. It's, God, what did he even said? Oh, yeah, he said essentially that he they were making too many demands about COVID safety protocols in schools, and that it's unfair that they can lobby. It's unfair that teachers can both try to get politicians elected and that those politicians set their salaries. He leans very heavily on the idea that it's sort of a corrupt arrangement to have a union be a participant in politics and also have politics be setting salaries. The interesting thing about that, of course, is that teachers aren't really paid very well. His whole thing is about teachers unions soaking the state. But even though unions get you more money than you would otherwise get, teachers don't end up being particularly well paid, even particularly well paid public sector employees. So without having unions, teachers would make really, really, truly abysmal wages. And one of the reasons people talk, the bad teachers in America. Well, one of the reasons that a lot of people leave the teaching profession is because it's incredibly poorly paid. So I mean, there's really nothing in this video. I really tried to deal with the arguments, but there were not really arguments here. There was just a sort of vague suggestion that teachers' unions have a corrupt bargain with the state.
Yeah. Also, it's fun that that's corrupt, right? Like if all of everything else. If you're a business and you're regulated by the state,
yes. Contractors, right? Private sector military contractors, right? No, who cares?
Yeah. No, exactly. All right, let's bring on Djene Bajalan, who, of course, is also. I'm not going to do the Ben Shapiro scholar joke again. Djene is a good friend of the show. You can watch him regularly on This Is Revolution. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of Shapiro's bizarre and horrible foreign policy arguments with Djene. But while you were still here, I wanted to switch it up. Nathan, you got a few more minutes? Nathan?
Oh, sorry.
Do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So while you were still here, I wanted to switch it up a little bit and talk about this book. It is a very early, like real Ben Shapiro scholars will know this. It's a very early Ben Shapiro contribution to the world. It's called "How to Debate Leftists and Destroy Them: 11 Rules for Winning the Argument." As we all know. The goal of arguments is to destroy people. That's the purpose, for which anybody would make an argument. I don't know what else, what other purpose there would be. You mentioned Natalie Wynn earlier. I remember an early ContraPoints video having a good line about this. It's just quoting commentators talking about how they were going to destroy her and using some very rapey metaphors, and it's just, is that really the point of reading it? I don't know, but he has 11 rules, and I was just hoping we could go through these. Djene, are you ready to hear the Ben Shapiro's 11 rules for debating leftists and destroying them?
Sure, and it's nice to be here and nice to meet you, Nathan. I'm very
nice to meet you too.
Even though you were talking bad about mushy peas on Facebook, which really upset me.
I apologize. There was a discussion of British food. I was defending British food.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You must try the delicacy of the mushy peas when they're done to perfection.
There were a lot. People were mad at me about dissing mushy peas.
Mushy peas, and just for everybody to know, mushy peas are actually chickpeas. They're not peas. There you go. That's the key trick to it. But yes, let's do the 11 rules. Let's do the 11 rules.
We should say that Nathan has been learning to cook.
Yes.
It's been fascinating.
I'm doing cooking videos now.
Yeah. So which is
pivoting.
Yeah, no, and I like that, right? Like I started cooking a lot more during the pandemic, but man, I sure wouldn't have done it on YouTube. So respect for that.
Yeah, it was a mistake, but people can watch my journey.
All right, so here are Shapiro's 11 rules. Gonna do them, I think. I think maybe 3 at a time because that's probably the only way of taking these all in.
11's a lot.
So rule number 1: walk towards the fire. All right. Rule number 1: walk towards the fire. He says you have to take the punch. You have to brush it off. You have to be willing to take the punch. That's the first rule. Rule number 2: hit first. In explaining this rule, he says don't take the punch first. Hit first. Hit hard. Hit where it counts. He's very fond of boxing metaphors. If I were a cruel person, I might speculate about how much actual boxing he's done. But we're just going to move on. Rule number 3: frame your opponent. He says that leftists are always characterizing conservatives as horrible bigots, and you should as a conservative debating leftists and destroying them, you should preempt this by characterizing your opponent as untrustworthy. Here's the quote. He says, "There's no way to convince someone that you don't hate him or her. You can convince them, however, the opposition is a liar and a hater." So, those are the first 3 rules. You walk into the fire, you hit first, and you frame your opponent.
Well, I would like to see Ben Shapiro go to a pub in Rotherham and try those kind of maneuvers out. See him walk into a punch on a Saturday night, and the violence metaphors are really amazing. This like posturing, it shows the kind of posturing nature of Ben Shapiro's nonsense. It's like a fight. It's not actually an exchange of ideas. It's not about convincing people. It's about posturing and looking good to the outside. It's a performative art. And then he gives away the game, doesn't he? He says and then you have to discredit your opponent, which I assume would include lying about them as well, because that's another classic maneuver that we see people using to smear and defame people. So yeah, it's just like typical Ben Shapiro posturing. Debate as a methodology of entertainment rather than pedagogy.
I think this book is quite interesting because it's just a sort of direct admission that people can't trust him. It comes out and says, "I am not seeking truth here. I am just seeking to make leftists look bad by any means necessary." It's a very kind of Machiavellian. I'm gonna do whatever I can to discredit you. Forget the ideas, forget the facts, and so his whole brand, of course, is about facts and about debate and reason and whatever. But he admits right here that that's not at all what he's interested in doing.
Yeah, no, it is a fascinating. It's a fascinating list. So number 4 is frame the argument. He says the left always frames the debate with buzzwords like tolerance and social justice. But you shouldn't fall for that. So he gives the example. Instead of arguing about whether it is unjust or intolerant to deny legal recognition of same-sex marriage, for example, he recommends making leftists debate, quote, why marriage should be redefined and how this will strengthen the institution. 5 is a little different from the rest, so we'll just skip that for a second. 6 is force leftists to answer questions. 7 is don't get distracted. 8 is you do not have to defend people on your side. So I guess the idea is like if you're, arguing with somebody and they bring up Donald Trump, you don't, just because you're a conservative, you don't have to defend Trump. 9 is if you don't know something, admit it. Okay, admirable. 10, let the other side have meaningless victories. And 11, body language matters. What I get out of all of this, and we have skipped one, and we'll get back to that one, but is that we've gone through 10 of the 11 rules, And some of them are a little shady in the way that I think Djene puts his finger on, and certainly there's some embarrassing metaphors going on. But put that aside, the 10 that we've covered, one thing that they're not about is, reasoning or, making a good argument or anything like that, anything even in the vicinity of that. They just frankly just don't even pretend to be about that. I mean, what about the facts and the logic? Thought he was all about the facts and the logic.
I mean, yeah, it really points to the pseudo politics that so many of these right-wing commentators engage in. It's not about facts and logic. Like I said, it's all about performance. This isn't a guide to how to debate people. This is a guide to how to act on a stage. So, it points to this as being entertainment and not political education, because it's not about winning an argument through facts and logic. It's about winning an argument through posturing and turning a debate into a kind of popularity contest, right? I mean, and that's why I'm very skeptical of the debate as a format. I know I'm on Give Them an Argument. So you are the debate champion of the left, Ben, to a certain degree, I would say. But I'm skeptical of the genre, because debating these guys on the right, having a debate requires the two sides to be engaging in good faith. And like Ben Shapiro is just telling us, like, don't engage with the left on good faith. It's not about engaging on facts and logic. It's all about these tricks, debate club tricks that you use to give the appearance of being confident of your views and make your opponent look like they are not confident of their views, and thus to an audience that isn't paying too much attention, it seems that you have the stronger ideas because you perform in a stronger way than your opponent, rather than actually getting down to brass tacks and like testing ideas through facts and logical argumentation. That would be my take. It's just like a how to do a show guide.
Well,
I think
Nathan, please, yes.
I think it's really there's something very disturbing about this, because by using debate, argumentation, facts as a brand and draining those words of their meaning. I mean, his latest show, the one that I was writing about, is called Debunked, right? Where he says that he's debunking left-wing arguments. But he's not actually debunking. He's not dealing with left-wing arguments. He's not even doing any debunking, right? He's using these same kinds of tricks. And what's frustrating, I think, I think you'd probably agree with this, Ben, is that people who do value, who do think that arguments need to be dealt with and debunked, and who do debate in good faith, and who do believe in exchanges of ideas, find these things almost discredited or made meaningless because there are practitioners like Ben Shapiro for whom it is empty theater.
Yeah, so I guess the one thing I would say, though, is, I understand what you're saying, Djene, but also I think that, like, there is a reason why I remember there was some university a year, two ago, maybe a couple of years ago, where they had, like, I think Powell's Republicans had brought in Shapiro to speak, and some people, I'm sure, the thing is a huge gift to the Shapiros of the world, which is trying to get them deplatformed, which then allows them to say, "Aha! My ideas are so dangerous, and edgy, that they're trying to silence me," which is what they build their brands off of. But the college Democrats or some progressive group brought down Nathan here, and he and Nathan ended up giving a talk. But he what he wanted to do, and I think said many times, was to make it a debate with Shapiro, and I think there is a reason. I think Shapiro knows what he's doing when he, he's willing to debate, like, random 19-year-olds in the Q&A, maybe,
Sure.
right? But he probably like he probably has somebody like in his detail when he goes around to campuses. There's probably somebody like whose whole job is to like watch out for like approaching men with transatlantic accents and brightly colored suits to make sure that he doesn't accidentally get trapped into arguing with Nathan. You know, like I think he knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
when
he's the equivalent. He's the equivalent of a WWE wrestler, right? You know, Nathan is like Mike Tyson, and Ben Shapiro is like Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, Macho Man Randy Savage may have a very buff body. He may look intimidating, but Mike Tyson's going to go through him.
Ben Shapiro.
Facade. So it's the different right-wing debate culture, I think, is a lot like WWE in that it gives the appearance of some kind of like intellectual activity when in fact it is purely choreographed and acted. As you say, most of these chappies, there are some exceptions of people who will debate people, but most of these people, as you know, they engage in highly controlled circumstances in order to maximize the effectiveness of their message, because their objective is propaganda, right? It isn't to like, it's not like Ben Shapiro is going to change his mind because Nathan presents like, Blair White on the trans issue gave him like all the very strong arguments about using pronouns and all those things, and he just refused to accept them. Right? He just refused to accept the argument. He had no response to it because it's not his objective. So it's a futility. Yes, say to them, these guys won't debate, right? But there's actually a futility in debating them because like they're like professional wrestlers. It's if you shatter the illusion.
Here's why I disagree a little bit, because I think that I think it's important to be clear on what the goal is if you're going to debate any of these people. Like if Shapiro somehow decided that he would actually be willing to talk to anybody on the screen right now, which he absolutely has never, and I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. But why do I actually think that would be a useful exercise? It's certainly not because I think that the result would be that he would come into that and with an open mind and treat it as a good faith, rational discussion or anything like that. But the goal isn't to convince Ben Shapiro. The goal is to convince, or at least plant seeds of doubt in anybody who's persuadable, who's watching. I mean, which I think is always the goal. I mean, even if you're just like arguing with somebody on social media, overwhelmingly the chance is that the person you're arguing with in that moment is probably has too much ego invested in it that to admit that they're wrong right then, and that's going to be 1,000 times more true. And I mean, this doesn't even have to. This applies to human beings vastly better than Ben Shapiro. They can, once somebody is doing this professionally and their whole professional identity wrapped around their politics, psychologically, that's going to make it way harder to admit that they're wrong. So again, I don't think the goal is to convince them. I think the goal is to convince people who are watching, or at least to contribute, to convince people who are watching. But I want to, before we go to the post game and get into some of the foreign policy stuff, I do want to talk about the one rule that we missed, because this is the only one that has anything to do with reasoning, is rule number 5, which is spot inconsistencies in the left's arguments. All right, finally, we have a rule that has something to do with examining arguments and seeing when they're good, when they give us good reason to believe the conclusion, when they don't. So in explaining rule number 5, spot inconsistencies in the left arguments, he gives 2 examples. He says, leftists, quote, say they want to ban assault weapons to stop gun murders, but that argument is silly because handguns are used to kill far more people than so-called assault weapons, and the left doesn't support an outright handgun ban. Second example, Leftists advocate a right to health care, but don't advocate the government require that, quote, a certain percentage of the population go to medical school, unquote. And this he sees as inconsistency. I know. So how
could those two things possibly be consistent?
Yeah. Which is kind of funny because Gene brought up the image of Shapiro walking into a pub, and where was the pub?
Rochdale. It's not the worst pubs. I would say definitely going to East Hull on a Saturday night, on a bank holiday Monday, and trying to tell people about his argument, he's going to get his face smashed in.
Which is funny because I remember a very funny Doug Stanhope bit in one of his stand-up comedy albums years ago about how bar fights are way worse and more dangerous in the UK because they have gun control and socialized medicine. Yeah. So
that is
you don't have to worry that the other guy's going to have a gun, and you know that if you get hurt, you won't be bankrupted by doctor's bills, so you can really go at it.
This is actually 100% true because, I used to Manchester and Nottingham had a reputation of having gun crime, and so I never had any trouble there. But in Hull, where there's no guns, I used to come home with my face beaten in. People would just randomly throw a glass at you, or they'd punch you in the face, but then they'd go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were somebody else." And then they would buy you a drink and it'd be fine. Or you'd say, they'd go, "Are you looking at my girlfriend?" And it's no, I'm not looking at your girlfriend. Because why are you saying she's ugly? And you still get punched, whatever you do. So there was no escaping it sometimes. But in America, I wouldn't mess around with people in a dive bar in Springfield. People would go. First of all, they'd probably give me COVID, and secondly, they might shoot me. So it could be anything. But yes. Logical inconsistencies. This is Ben Shapiro's thing, right? This comes down to the PMC culture we talked about on This Is Revolution, where, amongst the educated elite, trying to show yourself to be smarter and more intellectually superior to everybody is the way to assert your dominance. Whereas if you go to a working class community and you start acting like Ben Shapiro does, you're going to get thrown through a window.
Well, but I thought he believed in punching first and walking into the fire, and
we'll see how he handles it.
Yeah. So I think the gun one is weird because I have no idea what he means by the left there. Or I do, but it's a weird way of using it, right? At that point, he just means centrist Democrats advocate that, and the actual left, last time I checked, is actually pretty divided to think about the gun stuff. Although even as an objection to the views of centrist Democrats, it's a weird one because most murders can be committed with handgun, but that doesn't mean that if you took certain kinds of guns off the street that you can fire very quickly, etc., that that wouldn't have harm reduction effects. This seems kind of nirvana fallacy-ish, that either you take care of the entire problem in one fell swoop, or it's not, or it's not going to have any positive effects at all.
Well, most murders are committed with handguns, so why do we ban nuclear weapons, right? It's kind of the same thing. You're but it's an assault weapon is the reason that we want to ban it is because it can cause a larger amount of harm in a smaller amount of time. And that's considered a preventable problem that we ought to deal with, even if we feel the right to have a handgun. And also, you might feel the right to have a handgun actually does matter somewhat more than the right to have some kind of incredibly high capacity weapon that can only function to commit mass murder, rather than the only additional benefit it gets you is the ability to kill more people, right? So there are ways to make this consistent, but whatever. I don't.
But you're dodging the much bigger inconsistency that he pointed out, which is that you, sir, claim to believe in a right to health care. So how about it? Are you going to frog march a certain number of people at gunpoint to medical school or not?
This is what a weird. He's also phrased this as the free healthcare is slavery for doctors. argument, which you might have heard coming from the right, which I still am not quite sure that I grasp it, because in countries where there's a right to healthcare, they don't have doctors enslaved, and yet so I'm not even, but there's this idea, I think it comes from, I think the idea is that if you have a right to something, it must be an absolute that would be guaranteed no matter what you had to do to enforce it. Because I think they're conceiving of the right to healthcare the way that the right conceives of property rights. That is to say, like, you would destroy the universe to protect your property rights. So you would destroy you would enslave doctors to guarantee the right to healthcare. So I think it comes from the fact that they have quite a different understanding of what a right is than we do.
Which is funny, because I think that, like, most of these guys do, I mean, they're not like anarcho-capitalists, they're just conservatives. Like, so most of them do believe in some public services, like most, like, I don't know. I mean, I think they like
our policemen slave. I mean, our policemen slaves, you know, like the only people who can exercise, juridical power.
Do we have a right to police protection? If so,
our police slaves.
Are you going to legally force people to be police?
Is everybody in the military a slave? Is the Congressional Budget Office
teachers
slaves? Are teachers slaves?
Teachers.
It's just it's absurd. It's absurd.
I genuinely think it's one of the worst documents I've ever heard.
Even on their terms, and I think there's something to what Nathan is saying about, like, the way that they conceive these rights in this very particular and peculiar way that, like, even normal people realize that there's a kind of limit to this. You know, like, we have free speech. We have a right to free speech, but there are limits on the right to free speech. You know, if I, you know, what is it? The shouting fire in a crowded theater, or, you know, like directly saying, let's murder this guy, and then he gets murdered. And then I'm like, well, what about free speech? So we all know there's limitations on rights. So obviously I think it's an attempt. I think it's actually, honestly, they don't even believe that. I think it's just another rhetorical trick that is used to like try and make the left-wing position seem absurd, when in fact their position is absurd. This is what it comes down to.
You don't know, though, where the you know, I can never let that go by without pointing out the Supreme Court case where that yelling fire at a crowded theater, you know, was used to because the court was analogizing this to anti-war protesters passing out anti-conscription pamphlets, but you know, but yeah, I mean, clearly this is a bizarre conception of a right, and it's also just kind of like, you know, that's not what people mean. I mean, surely you know that's not what people mean. Like when you say we have a right to healthcare, what you mean is that you have a right to expect that the state will pick up the tab for your healthcare.
I think this gets to, I think, one reason why I do think debate can be quite valuable, and why I would like to have, even if the theatrical tactics mean that I actually don't know that I would do that well in a debate with. I was flattered to be compared to Mike Tyson, but I don't know that I would do, or Ben, that you would do well in a debate with Ben Shapiro, because he has all of these tactics that are designed to make you look foolish, right? But one reason I do think it's valuable, even when you can't, you know, beat the theatrical aspect of it, is if you end up looking reasonable. One of the things they depend on, the right depends on, is making the left look crazy. Like, they really want to portray us as conspiratorial, as you know, as part of this evil Marxist conspiracy to control the country and destroy our founding values and whatever. So just by appearing to be a person who isn't stupid, evil, or crazy, you can do a lot to kind of delegitimize and discredit the most extreme version of the right-wing position.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think in Shapiro's case particularly, I think that he's so reliant when he interacts with people on the idea that they're just going to be like sputtering or at a loss or getting mad at him, that just like literally like debating somebody over the age of 25, I actually think would be a problem for him. I'm not saying that to slam anybody who's younger than that. Just that, like, literally, I think that what he's most used to is engaging with people at lectures who have never engaged with anybody at a public event before. And so, like the example that in that New York Times article where they used the phrase "the cool kid's philosopher," the example that they used there of they also referred to Shapiro as a destroyer of bad arguments, which is certainly how he wants to be seen. But the only example they gave was a exchange in the Q&A after a university lecture where a young woman, I think she was 22, starts to challenge his position on gender identity, trans rights, and he says, "Well, how old are you? 22?" And he says, "Well, can you just start identifying as being 60?" And then she doesn't quite know what to say for a second, and then he bulldozes over her, which, by the way, is how you act if this goes to Djene's point about WWE, that this is definitely how you act if you really care about reasoning, that you don't give the person a chance to think, you just kind of highlight this moment, but also. What he's exploiting there is that this is probably the first time she's ever even asked somebody a question at a public lecture. So, I mean, she doesn't, she's somewhat flustered, and he's going to exploit that. Whereas if you were debating Nathan or me or whoever, then I'm not saying that people who really liked him wouldn't think he'd come out on top. I'm not saying he wouldn't have good moments, anything like that. But I don't think he could get the effect that I think he's very, very used to getting. Yeah. All right. We are going to go to the post game. We're going to talk about, we have been, using the terminology from the PragerU video earlier, exercising our American privilege and focusing on the domestic policy stuff. We're going to get into, thank you so much for the super sticker, Craig. We are going to get into some of Shapiro's terrible foreign policy arguments. The patrons already have the link for the post game. We're also going to get into some non-Shapiro content a little bit later in the post game. Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you so much, Djene.
Please do. Thanks so much, and I look forward, Nathan, to more cooking videos.
Okay, they're coming. I'm getting better slowly.
Awesome.
Best any of us could ask for. Left is best.